Okay. Donna's here. Yeah.
I know, earlier.
All right, guys. Let's go ahead and get started.
Just in time.
Just in time.
Oh, no.
Okay. I believe we left off on page 39. Has anybody got any questions on what we've talked about so far? Last week we talked about, we started more about alcoholism. Anybody got any questions? Okay, so, again, what this chapter is all about is about different examples of the insanity of alcoholism. Each little story is another example. And so now we're going to read about Fred. Hi, Susan.
Hi there. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Susan. Susan!
Okay, so we're going to read about Fred. We're on page 39. Fred is a partner in a well-known accounting firm. His income is good, and he has a fine home, is happily married, and the father of promising children of college age. He has so attractive a personality that he makes friends with everyone. If ever there was a successful businessman, it's Fred. To all appearances, he is a stable, well-balanced individual. Yet, he is alcoholic. We first saw Fred about a year ago in a hospital where he'd gone to recover from a bad case of jitters. It was his first experience of this kind, and he was much ashamed of it. Far from admitting he was an alcoholic, he told himself he came to the hospital to rest his nerves. The doctor oh my God. Hold on, let me clean my glasses.
Who did you say?
There we go. Far from admitting he was an alcoholic, he told himself he came to the hospital to rest his nerves. So, Fred is completely different than, I think it was Jim that we read about last week. Right, Jim was all pissed off and he went off isolating. And Fred is having a pretty decent life. He thought he had a bad case of the jitters. And let's go over to page 40. So Fred was, he said he was positive that his humiliating experience, plus the knowledge he had acquired, would keep him sober the rest of his life. Self-knowledge would fix it. And last week we talked about that, right? That's very important, that whatever you think you know is not, you know, that's not enough to stay sober with. So we heard no more of Fred for a while. One day we were told he was back in the hospital. This time he was quite shaky. He soon indicated that he was anxious to see us. The story he told is most instructive, for here was a chap absolutely convinced he had to stop drinking, who had no excuse for drinking, who exhibited splendid judgment and determination in all other concerns, yet was flat on his back nevertheless. I'm sorry, Mike. There's something on my glasses there. Okay. So I'll let him tell you about it. And Fred says, I was much impressed with what you fellows told me about alcoholism, and I frankly did not believe it would be possible for me to drink again. I rather appreciated your ideas about the subtle insanity which precedes the first drink, but I was confident it could not happen to me after what I had learned. So his knowledge, he thinks, is going to work for him and counter this. My reasons I was not so far advanced as most of you fellows, and that I had been usually successful in linking my other personal problems, that I would therefore be successful where you men failed. I felt I had every right to be self-confident, that it would be only a matter of exercising my willpower and keeping on guard. In this frame of mind, I went about my business for a time and all was well. I had no trouble refusing drinks and began to wonder if I were making too hard work of simple matter. One day I went to Washington to present some accounting evidence to a government bureau. I had been out of town before during this particular dry spell. There was nothing new about that. Physically, I felt fine, neither did I have any pressing problems or worries. My business came off well. I was pleased and knew my partners would be too. It was the end of a perfect day, not a cloud on the horizon. I love that. Every time I'm talking with a sponsee or something, they start telling me there's something's going on, I go, wait a minute, well, what happened before that? Before I was okay. Oh, it was end of a perfect day, not a cloud on the horizon. I went to my hotel and leisurely dressed for dinner. As I crossed the threshold of the dining room, the thought came to mind that it would be nice to have a couple of cocktails with dinner. That was all, nothing more. Now, last week I told you, let's stop for a second here and talk about Fred. Last week I said to you, and I said it to you a few times, that once we finish the first step, and you understand the truth about yourself, you'll never be able to drink on the truth again. You'll never be able to drink or use drugs on the truth again. Okay? And so what's happening to Fred here is that he buys this insane lie that it would be nice to have a couple cocktails with dinner. So he's completely blocked off from the truth. He can't drink on the truth. The truth he knows is that he's in trouble. So he says, I ordered a cocktail in my meal. Then I ordered another cocktail. After dinner, I decided to take a walk. When I returned to the hotel, it struck me a highball would be fine before going to bed. So I stepped into the bar and had one. And of course, he goes on a binge, and you know, he doesn't know where he's going or what's going on with him, right? At the bottom of the page says, as soon as I regained my ability to think, I went carefully over that evening in Washington. Not only had I been off guard, I had made no fight whatever against the first drink. This time I had not thought of the consequences at all. So completely blocked off from the truth because he knows all the consequences, right? The truth is that he knows all the consequences. And if he can stay in the truth, he wouldn't drink. This is why the next step, we start getting a relationship with a power greater than ourselves. Because again, the importance of this is that none of us are able to see the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And when we incorporate a God in our life, we're able to see more of the truth than in normal times, by ourselves, on our own being. But that requires some work. And of course, Fred didn't do any work. So he says, this time I have not even thought of the consequences. I commenced to drink as carelessly as though the cocktails were ginger ale. So he's screwed. And then on the next page, when they came to see him, he said, I saw that willpower and self-knowledge would not help in those strange mental blank spots. I had never been able to understand people who said that a problem had them hopelessly defeated. I knew then it was a crushing blow. Two of the members of Alcoholics Anonymous came to see me. They grinned, which I didn't like so much, and they asked me if I thought myself alcoholic and if I were really licked this time. I had to concede both propositions. They piled on me heaps of evidence to the effect that an alcoholic mentality, such as I had exhibited in Washington, was a hopeless condition. They cited cases out of their own experience by the dozen. This process snuffed out the last flicker of conviction that I could do the job myself. Then they outlined the spiritual answer and the program of action, which 100 of them had followed successfully. So, do you remember on week 1, when I shared with you that the recovery part of the program is broken into 3 parts? Okay, what is the problem? What is the solution? What is the program of action, right? So here, they're laying out to him the second and third part. They outlined the spiritual answer, what is the solution, and the program of action. What is the program of action? So they're outlining the second and third part of the recovery program. They're going over, as talking to him, and talking about their own experiences and his experiences, they're highlighting the first part. What is the problem? So you'll see this process work over and over again in this book. You'll see that what is the problem, what is the solution, what is the program of action. Now, this is a good, it's a good thing to have when you're dealing with anything in life. You know, not just alcohol or drugs. Any issue or problem you may have in your life, it's good to first understand what the problem really is, not what we think the problem is. So if you're working the steps on something other than alcohol and drugs, it's the same thing. What is really the problem, right? And then what is the solution? And that stays the same, and the program of action stays the same. So the only thing that changes as we continuously work steps is what is the problem, okay? So at first it's alcohol, right? And then you work in the steps on something else, you just take alcohol out and put that, whatever you work in the steps in on. He says, though I had been only a nominal churchman, these proposals were not intellectually hard to swallow. But the program of action, though entirely sensible, was pretty drastic. It meant I would have to throw several lifelong conceptions out the window. What was one of the conceptions that he had to throw out the window? For him, for Fred?
That he could do it on his own.
Yeah, because he's always linked, any problem he's ever come up with, he's always found a solution. Right? And he's always, so that's a huge thing that, you know, a lot of us, we get here and we kind of admit that we're whooped, right? But there's still something in a lot of us where we think, I can do this, I can overcome this, I can beat this. And we have to be beat down to complete surrender. He said, at the moment I made up my mind to go through with the process, I had the curious feeling that my alcoholic condition was relieved, as in fact it proved to be. Quite as important was the discovery that spiritual principles would solve my problems. I have since been brought into a way of living infinitely more satisfying and, I hope, more useful than the life I have lived before. My old manner of life was by no means a bad one, but I would not exchange its best moments for the worst I have now. I would not go back to it even if I could. Okay, so there's that other example. Okay, we went through Jim, who's obviously angry, and then we went through Fred, who's having everything was working for him. It was the end of a perfect day, not a cloud on the horizon, and he winds up drunk. Okay, so now we got another example. It says, many doctors and psychiatrists agree with our conclusion. One of these men, staff member of a world-renowned hospital, recently made this statement to some of us. What you say about the general hopelessness of the average alcoholic's plight is, in my opinion, correct. As to two of you men, whose stories I have heard, there is no doubt in my mind that you were 100% hopeless apart from divine help. Had you offered yourself as a patient at this hospital, I would not have taken you if I had been able to avoid it. People like you are too heartbreaking. Though not a religious person, I have profound respect for the spiritual approach in such cases as yours. For most cases, there is virtually no other solution. Now this is Dr. Silkworth, and he was the renowned specialist for alcoholism in those days and drug addiction. And the hospital that he worked at, in Towns Hospital, was the place to go for if you had alcohol problem. And he's telling these two guys, I wouldn't even have admitted you. Just the kind of people AA needs. Once more, the alcoholic at certain times has no effective or mental defense. Okay, what's happening here? My camera's broken. No effective mental defense against the first drink, except in a few rare cases. Neither he nor any other human being can provide such a defense. His defense must come from a higher power. You know, if you ever heard me share my story, I always talk about a huge thing that happened to me, and that I wanted to get drunk so bad, and I just had enough sense to remember this paragraph that I just read, and I asked God to help me. and he did. So, there's gonna come a time, that happens to you. Okay, so now, let's go back. Anybody got any questions on the different examples that we've had? Let's go back to page 30. And here's what I want you guys to do. Since it's early yet in the class tonight, we can do this right here, right now. We can all work our first step. Okay? So if you have something to write on, take a piece of paper and draw a line down the middle. Now, what I'm going to share with you is not AA approved. Okay? I want you to understand what I'm saying to you. So what we're doing now is not AA approved material. There's nowhere in our literature that tells us to do this. But I have found this to be the absolute best exercise to take us where the book says we need to be. So in the second paragraph on page 30, it says we learned we had to fully concede to our innermost self that we were alcoholic. This is the first step in recovery. All right? So let's look at that sentence. We learned. So what that means is, obviously, when we got here, we didn't know. So we had to learn. We learned that we had to fully concede. What does that mean, to fully concede? So that's
That level honest?
okay. Let's talk about it before we yell out things. What does that mean? What do you think that
To
means?
fully recognize, to fully concede.
Well, to recognize it is one thing, to concede to it is another
I
thing.
think to your bone, to your soul, I mean, I just,
Yeah, now most people that have been sober for a long time, they have come to the point where they fully conceded, some early in their recovery and some years down the road in their recovery. But what I'm trying to teach you tonight is an exercise that will help the new person get there right away. In fact, go ahead.
Surrender.
Okay.
For example.
So when I was a kid, right, in my neighborhood, the tough guys, the teenagers, in their leather jackets and their hair slicked back, the greasers, they would be on the corner hanging out. And I'd have to walk down the street, and my oldest brother was one of those guys there, and so they would always mess with me, you know. And I was like a lot younger than them, and I'd have to walk by, and they'd chase me, and they'd grab me, and they'd throw me down, and they'd pick my shirt up, and they'd give me a pink belly. I just keep smacking you until you say uncle. So at first I was a stubborn little sucker. I wouldn't say uncle. I'd take a beat, you know, and then they finally, oh, you ain't never going to say uncle, let him up. But then I learned that, because they do it to me all the time, and I learned that if I said uncle, they'd stop. So they'd get me, they'd throw me down, they'd pull my shirt up, they'd start hitting my stomach, I'd yell, uncle! And they'd let me up, and I'd try to kick them in the nuts and run away. And I share that with you because that's very true for me. That happened in my life more than once, and when I was a kid. And I realized that I had been doing that all of these years before I got sober. I've been doing the same thing. Surrendering, but only to get my way. And then I try to kick life in the nuts and take what I can take out of it, right? Because I really didn't surrender. You get it? So I really didn't surrender, but I would say the words. I would play the part. I would do what life expected me to do so I can get my way. But I really didn't surrender because I had a plan, you know. And my plan didn't turn out so good, neither did yours, I'm assuming. But, and that's what happens to us here. So when you say surrender, one of you just said, whoever said surrender, we're talking about surrender here. But remember I gave you the example of the soldier cut off from his troops and he's surrounded by the enemy. He's got two choices: to fight it out, which is a sure death, or to throw his hands up and surrender. Right? So we're talking about an unconditional surrender. That's where we got to get to, unconditional surrender. So here it's telling us that we learned we had to fully concede to our innermost self that we were alcoholic. So we could beat this up for an hour just on this point here, but let's get to something that we can probably agree on. My innermost self, I don't know what that exactly might be, my soul, my spirit, my deep inside me, right? Can I, what did you say, Kelly?
Gut level honesty.
Can I get gut level honest to myself? Gut level honest, right? Is that what they're asking me to do? Get really gut level honest, throw all the bullshit away and just the raw facts, right? Used to be a show called Dragnet, and guys used to say, just the facts, man. Just the facts. You younger people won't remember that. Just the facts, man. And if you remember that, you're not in the younger category. Which is okay. So, just the facts. So now I ask myself now then, how do I get gut level honest? Well, the first thing is, can I use my brain to get gut level honest? Huh? Said yeah?
You gotta use your brain, son.
You got to use your brain? Okay. We learned back in, there is a solution that the main problem center is in our mind rather than our body. Remember? So there's a disease in my brain that lies to me. So I can't really use my brain to get. So then I'll have to say, can I talk it out with somebody? Can I sit down and talk it out with somebody? Can I use my mouth to get gut level honest? She's shaking her head. No?
I say no.
Okay. Anything that comes out of my mouth is controlled by my sick brain. I surrender. You let me up, I'll try to kick you in the nuts, right? So, what comes out of my mouth is basically bullshit. Okay? So I can't use my brain, and I can't use my mouth. Here's a good one. How about my heart? Can I get gut level honest with my heart? What do you think? What do you think? Can I get gut level honest with my heart? Saying yes. So here's the thing to that, right? Basically, my heart is just an organ that pumps blood through my system. That's all it really is. Sometime, a long time ago, somebody came up with an idea, like probably to sell something. They came up with this little baby with a halo and wings and a bow and arrow, right? And Cupid is gonna hit you with the arrow, and you're gonna fall in love. I guess maybe it was to sell candy or something. Who knows? But you know, that's just a marketing ploy. Your heart basically is an organ that pumps blood through your system. I could just as well say I love you with both my kidneys.
Probably more.
I'm sure your wife would enjoy that.
Huh?
I'm sure your wife would enjoy that.
Yeah.
So sweet.
I said you're a romantic at heart, I can tell that.
I am. Yeah. I'm Aquarius. We're all romantic. Yeah. But being a romantic at heart is not what we're getting at right here. Right here, we're trying to get to gut level honesty. We're trying to fully concede to our innermost self. So being a romantic at heart is a deficit right now for these emotions and these feelings, okay? So what I want to do is it makes it a little bit harder for somebody who's a romantic at heart, I think. So I can't use my heart any more than I can use my brain or my mouth, okay? Because again, the truth of the matter is my heart is just an organ. So really, the only part of my body that really works, and I went through all of that just to tell you this, is my hand. Because I can take a pen, put it in my hand, and I can commit to a piece of paper just what I think and do when I'm under the influence of alcohol or in the pursuit of alcohol that I would not do if I were in sound mind. So on your piece of paper, you have two columns. On the left column, I want you to write on the top of the page, in the pursuit of, and fill in the blank or whatever you're working the steps on. And on the right column, put under the influence of. Now, once you start doing this exercise for a while, you don't really need to make 2 columns anymore. You can just make 1 column and you know what goes in that column. It's everything that I think and do, and write this down so you don't get it wrong. Everything I think and do that I would not think and do if I were in sound mind. Now, why am I saying that, if I were in sound mind? Because the second step is asking me to be in sound mind, isn't it? The second step is really helping me to get into sound mind. So, everything that I think and do that I would not think and do if I were in sound mind. Now, when I got sober, there were 3 things in my life that I had to look at. I mean, there was a lot more, but in this process, for the first step, it was alcohol, cocaine, and marijuana. Okay? So I did 3 sheets of paper. 1 for alcohol, 1 for cocaine, 1 for marijuana. And the reason I did 3 is because I wanted to be specific and see where my insanity was, you know. And it was, here's what I come to conclusion. And some of this stuff, the columns may blur, and they may be the same. It may be, maybe only something goes in 1 column, or something goes in both columns. It doesn't matter. What I'm saying to you, though, is the important thing is, don't put down stuff like lie. Don't put that down. Because we all know that we still lie even in sound mind. They're just little less liars, right? So, this is only stuff that you're sure that you would think or do if you were not in sound mind. Okay? So, for instance, for me, marijuana, I didn't have much on there. But I'm positive, there's no doubt in my mind, I could fully concede to my innermost self that if I smoke weed, I'm going to eat a meal. It doesn't matter if I just ate a meal, I'm going to eat another meal. Or 2.
Stranger meal.
Or 2. Right? So I wrote that down because in sound mind, I don't eat back-to-back meals. It sounds silly. It seems trivial.
So what would be in the pursuit of?
There would be nothing in the pursuit of marijuana for me. Now, I'm not saying there was something for you.
Oh, okay, okay.
For me, there would be nothing in the
Okay, in
pursuit
the
of.
pursuit of what I do to get that marijuana, though.
In the pursuit of marijuana, I didn't have anything that I put down. Under the influence of marijuana, I put down, eat a meal. Okay?
Sleep until you burn.
So, for alcohol, there wasn't a lot in there for me either. For alcohol, it was, I'm positive, I'm 100% sure, I can fully concede to my innermost self that if I drink, I'm gonna either, excuse me, but I know the way to say it, I'm either gonna fuck or fight. I'm either Romeo or Al Capone. That's who I was. Sometimes I was fucking fighting. But there's behaviors and stuff that I'm positive that I only do under the influence of alcohol. I didn't have anything in the pursuit of alcohol. Well, I did actually, if I remember right. I had ditched my family in the pursuit of alcohol. And not come home for a couple of days. Right? So, for me, my big thing was cocaine. And it doesn't matter how trivial or silly it sounds, but for me, I'm positive, there's no doubt in my mind, that if I do cocaine, I'm going to be crawling on the floor looking for shit that I think I dropped. I normally don't do that, right? Or I'm positive that if I do cocaine, I'm going to be peeping out the window. Okay? I'm going to be peeping out windows, looking for them out there, right? And I tell people, these are not wrinkles on my face, these are Venetian blind marks from years and years of peeping out the window. So, and I make a list of all that stuff, okay? And that's what I want you guys to do. For whatever you're working the steps on, I want you to make a list. And I want to talk about that, so I'm going to give you 5 minutes. to write some stuff down.
Can I ask a clarification?
You can't do it in your head.
So the things on the two lists don't have to relate to each other, right? It's
No.
just one list and another
And they
list?
can relate to each other, they can be the same
But
thing.
it's two different lists? Okay.
And again, once you get used to this exercise, you can just have one list, you don't need to separate. So, and if you don't have pen and paper, this is what you do when you go home later, when you work your first step. Because what we're getting at here is tangible proof.
And in the pursuit of my issue, that's what I'm writing, and then under the influence of that,
Yeah. In the pursuit of,
I would not do sound mind.
yeah. What you think and do that you would not think and do if you were in sound mind. And no matter how silly it is, write it down. So, of course, we learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost self that we were alcoholic. This is the first step in recovery. If you can do this, when you get to page 58 there where the steps, 12 steps are, you come to the first of the 12 steps. And you could admit that you're powerless. You understand why you're saying that. You're not just agreeing to a statement that's there. You understand it because you went through this exercise. And again, this is not in our literature, but this is an exercise that I found takes us right to here, page 30, second paragraph, first sentence. And lets us see that clearly.
So on the first one, is it the pursuit of,
What is it you're working the steps on?
okay, ours is food,
Food, okay.
right? So in the pursuit of, so not the abstinence, which is the lack of the food, but in pursuit
No,
of the
in-
food.
In pursuit of a piece of chocolate cake,
Okay.
right? In the pursuit of the food, what do you think and do that you wouldn't if you were in sound mind? And there should be lots of examples for you to write down under that.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah.
It doesn't matter what you're working the steps on, the process is the same, and it takes you to the, you can only come to one conclusion when you're done with this. While you're doing that, I'll get some coffee.
Coffee, huh?
I could be the same thing. Have you done this before?
Well, I look at it, so I may think it before I do it, and then when I'm doing it, when I have it in my mind.
I'm pretty damn happy over here. It's over here that,
This was like actually like in pursuit of what did I do to get that?
Yeah.
What did I do?
Right.
So this was like when
Okay, who wants to, anybody got any questions on what they're writing down and not sure about something?
you know,
Who wants to share what they've written down so far? Go ahead. What are you working the steps on?
yeah.
In pursuit of alcohol.
Alcohol? Okay. Hold up, guys.
Go out in the snowstorm.
Okay, this is in pursuit of? Okay.
And under the influence, make long distance calls to relatives.
So you normally wouldn't call these people if you were in sound mind?
I've done that
Why the hell did I call her after all these years?
for Holly.
God, I'm,
Okay, you need more though, write more down. But that's good though. You want to write as much down, even if it sounds really silly to you, if it doesn't make sense to you. Write it down.
I like that.
You're on the right track though. For those of you that are working the steps on something, some of us have been sober a long time. If you're working the steps on something other than alcohol, this is a really good exercise to smack you right in the face.
Yeah, this is something. Oh, God. Yeah, I'm seeing that this is crazy.
too damn heavy over this, under the influence of
Yeah, yeah,
color, clean the kitchen,
yeah, yeah.
but don't show up for work.
When you have, okay, let's talk about this for a while, because you're gonna take this home and you're gonna finish this. You're gonna finish this at home, guys. So you're gonna do this exercise at home, and then you're gonna go over it hopefully with your sponsor. You can sit down with your sponsor, and you can find out what you learned about yourself. But here's the thing. When you make a list of all the things you do in the pursuit of or under the influence of that you would not do if you were in sound mind, and then you read this list back to yourself, there's really only one conclusion that you could come up with. That conclusion is, wow, look how powerless I was. Look how unmanageable my life had become. There's really not much more that you can conclude from that insane list than that. And so we learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost self that we were alcoholic. This is the first step in recovery. So when I have some tangible proof about how powerless my life is and how unmanageable my life is, and it makes sense to me, when I go on to page 58 and read the first of the 12 steps and I admit that we're powerless over alcohol, dash that our lives have become unmanageable, I understand what that means now. It's so important to understand the difference between what powerless and unmanageability is about rather than agreeing with the statement on page 58 of step 1. Because so many people come in the rooms today and they're asked, are you powerless over alcohol? And they go, yeah. And they don't get it. There's nothing for them to get, and it's not their fault. It's not their fault. If you're sponsoring them and they've asked you to help, you got to help them understand what the problem is. And we've just spent 7 weeks talking about the problem. We just spent all this time going over what does this mean that the doctor was talking about, what does this mean that Bill was talking about, what does this mean that there's a solution, what does this mean more about alcoholism, what are these different examples of the insanity of alcoholism, and so what kind of disease do we have, you know, what we're dealing with, right? And now, perfect examples of just how powerless you are and how unmanageable your life had become. Written down right in front of you. That's a good first step. When you get to the end of this part and you get to this, you will really understand, you'll know the truth about yourself. And I've told you over and over again, once you know the truth about yourself, you cannot drink on the truth anymore. So when you make a list, and you got a page-long list of the things you do in the pursuit of or under the influence of, and you read that list, you know in your heart, you'll know that you can never drink again, knowing that. Yet, so many of us drink again. Why? They're like Fred walking across the threshold of the hotel. And the thought came to mind that maybe if a cocktail would be nice. Well, not if you're anything like Fred, a cocktail won't be nice. I deserve it. No one will know. This time it'll be different. All of these lies are much harder to work on you because you know the truth about yourself. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So I strongly urge you to finish this list wholeheartedly. Write out everything you can, even if it takes you days to write it out. Just keep writing all the insane stuff. Then read the list. If there's something on there that you know you do anyway when you're in sound mind, take it off. But when you're done, you should have a list that, no doubt, you can concede, fully concede to your innermost self that you're it. That you're it. Does that make sense? Okay. Anybody need to talk about anything about the first step? Anything about step one? Anything about the problem that we've discussed?
So you say if I can't go out and drink unless I buying the lie, but if I'm powerless, even if I know this.
Well, you don't have to buy the lie necessarily, because we just read an example in here where he didn't even have any thought about it, right?
Yeah,
So you don't have to buy a lie. Most of the time we do.
insane
But you
things.
have to, what has to happen is that you have to be cut off from the truth. See, Fred said, I didn't even think about it.
Right.
He gave it no thought at all. And everything he knew about what was going to happen to him and how it was going to be, he didn't give it any thought at all. So it's not necessarily, you don't necessarily have to buy a lie. You probably will. But what's going to happen for sure is that you're blocked off from the truth.
I have had those moments where I've been at the bar, not intending to drink, riding motorcycles, and all of a sudden I'm drunk. You know?
Ain't that funny? The way that happens.
So,
Bar, motorcycles, drink.
well, I still do those things, but I'm different.
Yeah.
I don't do many bars.
So, but I want you to understand that though. It's not necessarily having to buy a lie. It's just being blocked off from the truth. And the only way that we're not going to be blocked off from the truth and stay not blocked off from the truth is to make a connection with the higher power in the next step and prove that connection in the third step. Do the work to remove the things that block me from that connection so I can have a better relationship with this higher power and grow spiritually. Because if I don't grow spiritually, fail to enlarge the spiritual life, and go back out. So doing the first step 100% is good insurance to not go back out, and enlarging your spiritual life is the other insurance. Those are the only two reasons people go back out. They can put anything under the umbrella they want, but the truth of the matter is they've either never done a thorough first step 100%, or they fail to enlarge their spiritual life. That's what our literature tells us. So, the important thing then is to have a relationship with a higher power. So, if anybody got anything else on step one, anybody need to talk about anything else on anything we've done so far before we go on to this second step? So somebody is working the steps here on sex, and they said, in the pursuit of sex, I would tell any lie necessary to get what I want. No shit.
Is that Teddy Barlow?
Any of them.
I won't tell you who that is.
I'm just
You don't
kidding,
know
I
it
like-
anyway.
That was one of my girls' home.
Okay, let's go to page 44 then. So, and you guys that are working the steps on food, you're going to have a lot to write on this first step. You're going to have a lot to write, because there's so many things that could be considered in the pursuit of, you know.
But the other side of that is, I'm not in sound mind if I'm pursuing it. Wouldn't that be a choice to make?
Well, right, that's what you want to look at. You want to look at the things you think and do that you would not do if you were in sound mind. So looking back in hindsight, you can say, you know, when I thought this, obviously I wasn't in sound mind. Or when I did this, I obviously wasn't in sound mind. So yes, but that's what you want to get to. You want to get, because if I were in sound mind, I wouldn't think that or I wouldn't do that. So that's what the list is about, is everything that you think and do that you wouldn't if you were in sound mind, which means everything is about being not in sound mind. It's not your sound mind that gets you in trouble, is it?
No.
Right, so we don't need to worry about that. We need to look at How do we determine what's unhealthy for us? It's realizing I wouldn't do it if I were in sound mind. Does that make sense?
How many years do you have to have for that?
Huh?
How many years do you have to find sound mind?
How many years do you have to define sound
No, to
mind?
find it, to have
There's
it.
no time limit on it. It could be 2 months, it could be 20 years, who knows? And hope it's not 20 years. If you do the work, it shouldn't be 20 years.
I know, it's still crazy.
But, yeah. What is soundness of mind? We're going to find that out here. All right, page 44. Okay, so chapter 4, we agnostics. In case you don't know, let me explain to you what the chapter means. The title of the chapter, I should say. The root origin of the word agnostic is ancient Greek. And there's 2 words that it derives from. You might want to write this down because it's... So ag, A-G, means without. And gnostics means knowledge. That's ancient Greek, and that's the root origin of the word agnostics. It's interesting, if you think about it for a minute, because what that really says is we without knowledge. That's really what the chapter is titled. Now, what are we talking about? We're talking about God. We're talking about a higher power. You call your God whatever you want, I say God. But we're talking about a higher power, okay? And I lack, or a better word for ag is lack. It could be without, or lack is a better definition of it. So lack knowledge. And the truth is that I lack knowledge. When I got here, I certainly lacked knowledge about God. Because if I didn't lack knowledge about God, my life wouldn't have been in the condition it was in.
I had a knowledge of God, or I thought I did, I guess.
Okay?
I mean, it's not anything near, it's nothing like what my conception of God is today, thank God.
Yeah, we all have a knowledge of God to certain degrees.
But it wasn't like that intimate relationship, though.
Well, whatever it wasn't sufficient enough to keep you sober.
You know, Danny, some of us come into the program that was raised basically scared of God, or I was. So why would I reach out? Well, that was my problem in the beginning. I'm not that way right now.
Okay?
But why would you want to reach out and say, help me?
Good question. Good question. If anybody here says a lot of us were raised to be afraid of God, and why would I reach out to God if I were brought up to be afraid of God? And the answer to that is simple, because you lack the knowledge about who God really is. You lack knowledge about God. If you knew the truth about God, you wouldn't be afraid. So what we want to do here, and this step, we're going to spend time on this step. We're going to spend just as many weeks on this step as we did on the first step, because we're going to talk a lot about making up a God that we're comfortably in. You see, here's a big mistake that people make. They skip right through the first step. They don't understand the problem. They skip right through the second step. Do you believe in God? Yeah. You're willing to believe in God? Yeah. You're willing to believe I believe in God? Okay. And then the next thing you know, they're doing an inventory. And they have no concept. And I'm going to tell you this, okay? If you don't have a relationship with God here in this step, if you don't begin a relationship with the God that makes sense to you and you're comfortable with, it is going to be impossible for you to do a third step. Impossible. Not hard, not difficult, impossible. So the only thing possible will be that you will fool yourself and those around you that you're really doing this deal. And you may think you are. And you're going to be stuck like Chuck because you ain't got a clue about who and what God is. The third step is asking us to turn our will and our lives over to the care of who? What? I don't know. How could you possibly? Now, if you were taught to fear God, how could you possibly turn your will and your life over to the care of God? You can't. Again, this is something I want to stress to you guys. It's not difficult. It's not very hard. It's not really, really, really hard. It is impossible. The only thing you can do is make believe that you're doing it. And that ain't going to work. So if you don't get a relationship with God here in step 2, and that begins from wherever you're at. It doesn't matter where you're at and what you were brought up with. If you were brought up to fear God, that's okay. Because from that, we're going to build a relationship that we're going to be able to take into the third step, where I say, because at the end of the second step, we're going to do another exercise. And that exercise is going to be something that we can carry into step 3 and the rest of the steps. Okay? And so, but I give you the example, I use the analogy, I always use the same one. It's me, I'm going to open a finance company. And I've been using this analogy for 20 years or more with people. So I say to you, I'm going to open a finance company, and I want you to give me all your money, I'm going to make you rich. Steve, you going to give me all your money?
No.
Oh, man. Deb, you going to give me all your money?
No.
Okay.
In the pursuit of.
None of you are going to give me all your money. Okay? What happens is this. You have a lot of doubt in your mind and a lot of questions in your mind. What does this guy know about the finance business? What is he going to invest in? How much money is it going to cost me? How much money am I going to make? How long is it going to take to get this money back? Who else is doing this? Right? You got a lot of questions. After I answer all your questions and appease you with all your concerns, you then might give me a little something. But you're not going to give me all your money, even after you've been satisfied. Right? Does that make sense what I'm saying to you? You're never going to give me all your money. And that's what step 2 is about. It's a process. It's going to go on. It's going to continue to go on. And as you grow, the step 2 is going to grow with you. But you have to get something. In order for you to give me any money, you must be comfortable with the fact that you're going to let go of your money and I'm going to do good with it. And in order for me to do the third step, to turn my will and my life over to the care of a God, I must be comfortable with the fact of who God is. He's not going to punish me. I got nothing to fear with God. That happens here in step 2. That doesn't happen 2 years down the road. I mean, it may happen 2 years down the road. May have happened to a lot of people 2 years down the road. But if you do the work, it can happen to you here in step 2. That's what step 2 is for. It says on page 59, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. So another thing, like we just talked about, we learned we had to fully conceive, we didn't know we had to learn. Came to believe doesn't mean coming here believing. Okay?
So when Bill Wilson wrote the 12 by 12, in step 3, it said, we saw we were powerless over alcohol, but we also perceived that faith of some kind, if only in AA itself, was possible to anyone. These conclusions did not require action. They required only acceptance.
Okay.
So is that what you're saying in your step 2 analogy?
Well, you know, I don't know what you mean, what Bill meant by it didn't require action, you know? I think if you start, I'm a believer that we write on every step.
I did. I wrote it, what my God was.
Well, that would be action to me.
Yeah.
That would be taking action, you know? And I don't think Bill did mean that. I think, you know, but I'm not sure, huh?
You don't have to get off the couch yet. You can write it on the couch.
Okay, you can write it on the couch.
I mean,
I think there's work
Read it off the couch.
that has to be done. And I think there's a difference between faith and believing, okay? A lot of people think that step 2 is about faith. It's not. It's not about faith. It's about believing.
When Bruce had me look up the definition of faith, my first sponsor, it's trust and confidence. So that would be some of faith in step 2.
Well, there's some of faith in every step. But what I'm talking about is don't hang your hat on step 2 is about faith, because it's not. Because you can't have faith in something you don't believe in. Right? So we fool ourselves and say that, yeah, step 2 is about faith, I have faith, and I don't even have a clue who and what God is. I ask people, what is it that you believe about, what is it you understand about the God of your understanding? And they go, I don't know. No. Well, I'm sorry, but that's not good enough. I don't know, don't work here. You have to start getting into a relationship with a higher power. And so what believing is hope. Right? And so let me give you an example. I'm driving in Dallas. I just got an 18-wheeler just smacked into me on my way here today. My front of my car's all messed up. I'm driving in Dallas and something happens with my car, right? So I don't know anybody in Dallas, so I call my friend Kyle up. He's from Dallas, and I say, Kyle, my car's messing up. You know anybody I can take it to that can fix my car and not charge me a lot of money? And he says, yeah, take it to Steve's shop over here, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I don't go there on faith. I go there hoping that my friend sent me to a good place, right? And Steve fixes my car, doesn't charge me a lot of money, I'm on my way. A year later, I'm driving through Dallas, I got trouble with my car. Do I need to call Kyle up? No. Why? Because I have an experience. Faith comes through experience. I first have to come to believe before I can have faith. I can't have faith in something I don't believe in. So I come to believe, and my experiences turn my belief into faith, where I know. I can stand before you tonight and I can look in the eye and I can tell you, I know that God loves me and God's got my back. No matter what else happens. I know that. That's not hope anymore. That's out of experience. And experience after experience after experience. We're out of time.
Hey, come on.
Okay, we're finished. Take it up from here next week. Got a lot to talk about step 2. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.